The wall was older than memory. It had stood for 8,000 years, men said, though no one truly knew. It had seen the long darkness and the dawn that followed. It had watched kingdoms rise and fall. It had endured winters that lasted a generation and summers that felt like moments. And through it all, through every age of men, through every reign of kings, the wall had never cared about the small lives that moved beneath it. Harwin had learned that truth slowly, in the 3 years since he had taken the Black. He was nobody. A builder's son from a village near Widow's Watch. His father had taught him to work with wood and stone. His mother had taught him to keep his head down and his mouth shut. Both lessons had served him well at Castle Black. He was not a ranger. He was not a steward. He was simply a builder, one of 50 men who kept the wall standing and Castle Black from falling into ruin. The work was endless. The cold was worse. On this particular evening, as the sun died, behind the western mountains, and the stars began to prick through the darkening sky, Harwin was doing what he did most evenings. He was in the workshop beneath the armory, planing boards for new shutters. The old ones had rotted through. Everything rotted through eventually at the wall. The ice preserved the dead, but it consumed the living bit by bit. The workshop smelled of sawdust and lamp oil. The air was cold enough that his breath made clouds. His hands ached from the work, but he kept at it. Idle hands drew attention, and attention was the last thing Harwin wanted. He had learned that lesson early. Keep your head down, do your work, stay out of the way of your betters. Outside, he could hear the faint sounds of Castle Black settling in for the night. Boots on stone, voices calling across the yard, the clang of the gate closing, the normal sounds of the watch preparing for another long night. The watch, the shield that guards the realms of men. Harwin had believed those words. Once, when he was younger and stupider, when he had stood before the heart tree and sworn his vows. He had believed he was joining something greater than himself, something pure, something that mattered. 3 years had taught him otherwise. The Night's Watch was not pure. It was a dumping ground for the unwanted, rapers and thieves and cowards, bastards and fourth sons with no inheritance, men who had committed crimes and men who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. They wore black and they manned the wall, but they were still the same men they had always been. The only difference was that now they could not leave. Harwin set down his plane and examined the board. Straight enough. Good enough. He added it to the stack and reached for another. The work was mindless, and he preferred it that way. Mindless work meant mindless thoughts. Mindless thoughts meant he did not think about home, did not think about the life he might have had if things had been different. If he had not been caught stealing bread from the sept, if the septon had not been so angry, if his father had been able to pay the fine, if. The world was built on ifs, and they were worth nothing. A sound made him pause. Footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy ones, a man walking with purpose. Harwin kept his head down and kept working. The footsteps passed without stopping. Good. He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Things had been tense lately at Castle Black. Even a builder could feel it. It had started weeks ago when the Lord Commander had returned from Hardhome. Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell, the youngest Lord Commander in living memory. A man who had been elected by the narrowest of margins, and who had made enemies with almost every choice since. Harwin had no strong feelings about Jon Snow. The Lord Commander was far above his station. They had never spoken, had barely been in the same room. But Harwin heard things. Everyone heard things. The Wall was a small world, and secrets travelled fast. Jon Snow had let the wildlings through the Wall. That was the simple version, anyway. The truth was more complicated, as truth always was. The wildlings had been dying beyond the Wall, dying by the thousands, slaughtered by creatures that should not exist, the dead that walked, the others, the white shadows from the old stories. Some men believed those stories, others did not. But Jon Snow had gone north, and he had come back with wildlings, thousands of them, women and children and old men. Warriors too. Aye, but not just warriors. Whole clans and families, all of them desperate and half-frozen and grateful to be alive, and he had let them through. The Night's Watch had been founded to keep the wildlings out. That was what every man learned when he took the Black. The wildlings were the enemy. They raided and they killed, and they knew no laws but their own. For 8,000 years, the Watch had stood against them, and now they were here, south of the Wall, living in tents and lean-tos scattered around Castle Black and the other castles, eating the Watch's food, sharing the Watch's fires. Some had even been given shelter inside the castles themselves. It made men angry. Harwin could understand that. He had heard the stories too. Wildlings had killed his grandfather during a raid, years before Harwin was born. But he could also understand Jon Snow's reasoning, or at least he thought he could. If the dead were truly walking, if the others were truly real, then did old hatreds matter? Could the Watch afford to leave thousands of potential allies to die? He did not know. He was not paid to know. He was paid to cut wood and fix walls and keep his mouth shut. But the anger was real. He heard it in the common hall, heard it in the yard, heard it in the barracks after the lamps were put out. Men muttering, men cursing, men talking about how the old bear would never have done such a thing. How the Lord Commander had betrayed everything the Watch stood for. And then the letter had come. Harwin hadn't seen it himself, had not read it, could not read it even if he had, truth be told. His letters were poor, but he had heard about it. Everyone had heard about it. A letter sealed with pink wax, a letter from Ramsay Bolton, the new Warden of the North, the bastard of the Dreadfort, though men did not call him that any more, not since his father had legitimized him. The letter had demanded things. Harwin did not know all the details. Something about a bride, something about Stannis Baratheon, something about the wildling king, Mance Rayder, who men said had been burned alive weeks ago. The details did not matter. What mattered was that Jon Snow had read the letter, and then he had done something, made some decision, called the wildlings to arms, some said, planned to march south, others claimed, broken his vows, everyone agreed. The Night's Watch took no part in the wars of the Seven Kingdoms. That was the first lesson every man learned. The Watch served the realm, not any king, not any lord. They were sworn to take no side in the quarrels of men, but Jon Snow had taken a side, or he was about to, and that had made even more men angry. Harwin had stayed out of it, had kept his head down, had worked his shifts and eaten his meals, and spoken to no one who did not speak to him first. He had no friends at Castle Black. Friends meant complications. Friends meant being drawn into conflicts that were not his own. He preferred it that way. The workshop was warm, in its way. The work kept his blood moving, The lamp kept the worst of the cold at bay. He could hear the wind picking up outside, moaning through the cracks in the stones. Another storm coming, most like. There was always another storm. He finished the board and set it aside. How many was that? 10? 12? He had lost count. Enough for now, perhaps. He was expected in the common hall for supper soon. Missing meals drew attention. So did eating alone. He'd learned to sit at the edges of the long tables, close enough to seem part of things, far enough to avoid conversation. It was a skill he had perfected. Harwin cleaned his tools and put them away, everything in its place. That was another rule he lived by. The wood shavings he swept into a barrel. They would be used for kindling later. Nothing was wasted at the wall. Nothing could be. He extinguished the lamp and stepped out into the corridor. The cold hit him immediately. The workshop had been almost pleasant. The corridor was not. The stones seemed to radiate cold, as if they had been carved from the wall itself. Perhaps they had been. Harwin did not know. He had never asked. The walk to the common hall took him through the yard. He pulled his cloak tighter and kept his eyes down. The yard was not empty. It never was. Men were always coming and going, always moving, always working. The watch did not sleep. The saying went. But something felt different tonight. Harwin could not name it, could not point to any one thing. But the air felt strange, tight, like the moment before a storm breaks. He had felt it before, back in his village. The animals would go quiet, the birds would stop singing, and then the thunder would roll in. He passed a group of rangers standing near the armory. They were speaking in low voices. One of them glanced at Harwin as he passed. Their eyes met for a moment. Then the ranger looked away. Harwin kept walking. Near the gate he saw wildlings, 3 of them, big men with beards and furs. They were watching the yard, just watching. Their faces were hard, their eyes were harder. One of them had an axe on his belt. The watch had let them keep their weapons, within reason. Another thing that had made men angry. Harwin gave them a wide berth. He had no quarrel with wildlings, had no quarrel with anyone. He just wanted to eat his supper and go to sleep and wake up tomorrow and do it all again. The common hall was loud when he entered. Men were gathering for the evening meal. The smell of stew filled the air, onions and barley and some kind of meat. Mutton, most like. Or goat. It did not matter. It all tasted the same after a while. Harwin found his usual spot, far end of the third table, near the wall. He sat down and waited for the food to come. Around him, men talked and laughed and argued. The noise washed over him like waves. He heard none of it, heard all of it. The words blended together into a meaningless roar. But one phrase kept repeating. He heard it from the table behind him, heard it from the men near the door, heard it whispered by a steward passing with a pitcher of ale. For the watch. Harwin did not understand. For the watch was something men said when they toasted, when they swore their vows, when they stood together against the darkness. It was not something men whispered, not something that made other men go quiet. He looked up, caught the eye of another builder sitting across from him. The man's face was pale. He looked away quickly, too quickly. Something was wrong. Harwin felt it in his bones, felt it in the way men were glancing towards the door, felt it in the tension that had settled over the hall like a shroud. He pushed his bowl away. His appetite was gone. The Lord Commander had not arrived. Usually Jon Snow ate with the men at the high table. Not tonight. The high table was empty. The Lord Commander's chair sat vacant. Harwin stood. He did not know why. He just knew he needed to leave, needed to be somewhere else. The common hall felt too small, too crowded, too loud and too quiet all at once. He made for the door. No one stopped him. No one seemed to notice. Outside, the yard was darker than before. The torches had been lit, but they seemed dim. The shadows seemed deeper. Harwin stood in the cold and tried to calm his breathing. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. He was imagining things, but he was not. The Lord Commander's tower stood across the yard. The windows were dark. No light burned in the upper chambers. No smoke rose from the chimney. It looked abandoned. It looked wrong. Harwin stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned away. This was not his concern. Whatever was happening, whatever had happened, it was not his place to ask. He was a builder. He cut wood and fixed walls. That was all. Keep your head down. Do your work. Stay out of trouble. He started back toward the barracks. His footsteps echoed on the stones. Behind him, the common hall had gone quiet. Too quiet. He did not look back. The wind picked up. It came from the north, from beyond the wall. It carried the smell of ice, and something else, something Harwin could not name. He pulled his cloak tighter and walked faster. The wall loomed above him, 700 feet of ancient ice, silent, patient, eternal. It had stood for 8,000 years. It would stand for 8,000 more. And the small lives of men, the choices they made, the blood they spilled, mattered to it. Not at all. Harwin reached the barracks and went inside. He did not know it yet, but the world had already changed. The night the wall went silent had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The barracks were cold and empty when Harwin entered. Most of the men were still at supper. He was grateful for the solitude. The unease that had driven him from the common hall still clung to him like morning frost. He could not shake it. He moved to his bunk, third from the door, bottom level. The same bunk he had slept in for 3 years. The mattress was thin and the blanket was rough, but it was his. In a place like Castle Black, even small things became precious. Harwin sat down heavily. His hands were still cold from the walk across the yard. He rubbed them together, trying to bring feeling back to his fingers. Outside, the wind continued to howl. It was going to be a bitter night. But then, most nights were bitter at the wall. He should sleep. Morning came early, for builders. There was always work to be done, always something that needed fixing. The wall was eternal, but everything around it was falling apart. But sleep would not come, not yet, not with that feeling still gnawing at his gut, for the watch. Why had men been whispering those words like a curse? Harwin lay back on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. The wood beams were dark with age and smoke. He had counted the knots in them 100 times during sleepless nights. 17 in the beam directly above him. He started counting them again. Anything to quiet his mind. He had reached 12 when he heard it. A shout, distant, muffled by stone and distance, but unmistakable. Harwin sat up. He strained to hear. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just the wind. Just the creak of old wood settling. He started to lie back down. Then another shout. Closer this time, and another. Men's voices raised in anger or alarm. He could not tell which. Harwin stood and moved to the door. He opened it a crack and peered out into the night. The yard was darker now. Some of the torches had guttered out. The shadows had grown longer, deeper. He saw movement near the Lord Commander's tower. figures in black, men running. More shouts, but the words were lost to the wind. Something was happening, something bad. Every instinct told him to close the door, to go back to his bunk, to pull the blanket over his head and pretend he had heard nothing. This was not his concern. He was a builder. Whatever was happening out there was ranger business, steward business, officer business, not his. But his feet would not move. He stood frozen in the doorway, watching the shapes move through the darkness. More men were gathering now. He could see them converging on the Lord Commander's tower. 20 men, 30. It was hard to count in the dim light. Then he heard something that made his blood go cold. A scream, high and sharp and full of pain. It cut through the night like a knife. And then it stopped, just stopped, as if someone had snuffed out a candle. Harwin's hand tightened on the doorframe. His heart was hammering in his chest. He wanted to close the door, wanted to hide, but he could not look away. More figures appeared, wildlings this time. He could tell by their furs and their movements. They emerged from the shadows near the gate, weapons in hand. They were not running. They were walking slowly, deliberately, toward the crowd near the tower, like wolves approaching a kill. Someone shouted an order. The words were lost, but the tone was clear, commanding, harsh. The crowd began to disperse. Men broke away in groups of 2 and 3. Some headed toward the armory, others toward the gates. They moved with purpose now, with organization. This was not a brawl. This was not a fight that had gotten out of hand. This was something else, something planned. Harwin finally found the strength to move. He stepped back into the barracks and closed the door. His hands were shaking. He pressed his back against the wood and tried to breathe. What had he just seen? He did not know, could not know. But the pieces were starting to fit together in his mind, forming a picture he did not want to see. The tension of recent weeks, the anger over the wildlings, the letter from Ramsay Bolton, the whispers of "For the Watch," the Lord Commander's dark tower, the scream in the night. No, no, it could not be. But even as he denied it, he knew. Some part of him had known since he left the common hall, since he saw the empty high table and the dark windows and felt the wrongness in the air. Something had happened to Jon Snow. Harwin moved away from the door on unsteady legs. He went to his bunk and sat down. His mind was racing. His thoughts were jumbled and scattered. He tried to make sense of them, tried to think clearly. If Jon Snow was hurt, if he was dead, then who commanded the watch? The question seemed simple, but it was not. The Night's Watch had rules, traditions. When a Lord Commander died, the senior officers would choose a new one. There would be a choosing, a vote. Men would make speeches and promises. Alliances would be formed. And eventually a new commander would be elected. But that took time, days, sometimes weeks. And in the meantime, command fell to the first ranger or the Lord Steward or whoever was highest in the chain. Except the first ranger was dead, killed beyond the wall months ago. And the Lord Steward was old and weak and loyal to Jon Snow, which meant command would fall to whoever was strong enough to take it. Harwin thought of the men he had seen in the yard, the organization, the discipline. Someone was already in control. Someone had planned this. Alliser Thorne. The name came to him unbidden. Sir Alliser Thorne, the Master at Arms. A knight from a noble house who had been sent to the wall after Robert's rebellion. A man who had hated Jon Snow from the moment the boy arrived at Castle Black. A man who had run Against Jon for Lord Commander, and lost by a single vote, a man who believed the Watch had lost its way. Harwin had heard Thorne speak, had heard him drilling the new recruits. The man had a voice like iron and opinions to match. He believed in the old ways, the old traditions. The wildlings were the enemy. The wall was the defence. The Watch served no king, but held the line against the darkness. Jon Snow had broken those traditions, had let the wildlings through, had planned to march south, had forgotten what the Watch was meant to be. At least, that was what Thorne believed. That was what he had said, loudly and often, to anyone who would listen. And now Jon Snow was gone, and Thorne's men controlled the yard. Harwin felt sick. He had known this was coming. Not consciously, perhaps, but some part of him had sensed it, had seen the signs, the anger building, the factions forming, the Watch splitting into camps. He had just hoped he was wrong. The door to the barracks opened. Harwin jumped. His hand went to his belt, but he had no weapon. Builders did not carry swords. He looked up, heart pounding. It was Kedge, another builder, an older man with a scarred face and a limp from an injury years ago. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. "You heard?" Kedge asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Harwin nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. Kedge moved to his own bunk and sat down. His hands were shaking. "They killed him," he said. "The brothers. They killed the Lord Commander." The words hung in the air like smoke. Harwin wanted to deny them, wanted to say it was impossible, but he could not. He had seen too much, heard too much. "How do you know?" he asked. His own voice sounded strange to his ears, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I was in the common hall when Wick ran in. He was shouting, said there was blood in the yard, said the Lord Commander had been stabbed, said the officers were gathering. Is he dead?" Kedge shrugged helplessly. "I don't know. Wick didn't know. But there was blood, Harwin, a lot of blood, and men were standing over him with knives, saying 'For the Watch' over and over like a prayer. For the Watch, there it was again. Those 3 words that had been whispered all evening. Now Harwin understood. They were not a toast. They were a justification, a reason, an excuse. We killed him for the Watch, for the good of the Order, for the defense of the realm. Harwin felt cold, colder than the wind outside, colder than the wall itself. "Who?" he asked. "Who did it?" "Thorne's men," Kedge said. "Bowen Marsh, Othel Yarwick, some of the stewards, some of the rangers. I don't know all the names. But it was planned, Harwin. This wasn't some sudden fight. This was murder. Murder." The word settled over them like a shroud. In the Night's Watch, brothers were not supposed to kill brothers. That was the whole point of the vows. They were supposed to be a brotherhood, family bound by oaths and service. But families broke. Oaths were forgotten, and men killed each other for reasons that seemed good at the time. "What happens now?" Harwin asked. Kedge shook his head. "I don't know. Thorne's in command, I suppose. Or Marsh, or whoever's left standing when this is over." "The wildlings," Harwin said. "They won't accept this. Jon Snow brought them here. He was the only thing keeping them from tearing us apart." "I know. There's thousands of them, and they're armed." "I know." The 2 men sat in silence. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the cold seemed to deepen. Harwin could hear his own heartbeat, could hear Kedge breathing, could hear the old wood of the barracks creaking. And beneath it all, he heard nothing. No bells, no commands, no officers shouting orders. The sounds that normally filled Castle Black were absent. The watch was silent. The wall was silent. It felt like the world was holding its breath. The door opened again. More builders came in. They moved quickly, quietly, like men trying not to be noticed. They went to their bunks without speaking. Some of them looked frightened. Others looked angry. None of them looked at Harwin or Kedge. After a few minutes, one of them spoke. His name was Jeren, a young man from White Harbour. He had only been at the wall for a year. "They've closed the gates," he said. "No one in or out. Thorn's men are on the walls. The wildlings are in their camps. Everyone's just waiting." "Waiting for what?" Kedge asked. Jeren shrugged. "For someone to make a move, I guess. For the Lord Commander to die or live. For something to happen." But nothing was happening. That was the horror of it. Jon Snow was lying somewhere, bleeding or dead. The men who had stabbed him were in control. The wildlings were armed and angry. And everyone was just waiting, just watching, just holding still, like they were all afraid to be the first to move. Harwin stood. He could not sit any more, could not just wait. He needed to see, needed to know, even if knowing changed nothing. "Where are you going?" Kedge asked. "Out," Harwin said. "Just out." "That's not smart." "I know." He went to the door and opened it. The cold hit him like a fist. He stepped out into the yard and let the door close behind him. The yard was not empty now. Men stood in small groups. Some wore the black of the watch. Others wore furs and skins. Wildlings. They watched each other across the open space like wolves circling. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was unnatural. Wrong. Harwin walked slowly, carefully, keeping to the edges of the yard. He did not look at anyone directly, did not want to draw attention. He just needed to see the Lord Commander's tower, needed to know if what Kedge had said was true. He rounded the corner of the armory. The tower came into view. There was a crowd gathered there, not as large as before, but still substantial. Men in black stood in a rough circle. Their hands were on their weapons. They were guarding something. Or someone. Harwin moved closer. He stayed in the shadows, stayed quiet. He could see better now, could see the ground inside the circle. There was blood, dark and wet and spreading across the snow like a stain. So much blood. It looked black in the torchlight, and in the center of it, lying face down, was a body. The body wore black. The body did not move. Harwin felt his stomach turn. He looked away, looked up at the wall looming above. The ancient ice seemed to glow faintly in the starlight, beautiful and terrible and utterly indifferent to the small tragedy playing out below. A hand gripped his shoulder. Harwin spun, heart racing. It was one of Thorn's men, a ranger named Rast. His face was hard. His eyes were harder. "Get back to your barracks," Rast said. His voice was low, dangerous. "This doesn't concern you." Harwin nodded. He did not argue, did not resist. He just turned and walked away. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking. Again. He made it halfway across the yard before he heard the sound. A low moan from the wildling camps beyond the wall. Not words, just sound. Grief or rage, or both. It rolled across Castle Black like thunder. The wildlings knew, they had seen, and they were not going to forget. Harwin walked faster. He reached the barracks and went inside. Kedge and the others looked at him. He did not speak, just went to his bunk and sat down. Outside, the night continued. The wind howled. The wall stood silent. and somewhere in the darkness, Jon Snow's blood soaked into the snow, while his killers stood over him and told themselves they had done the right thing. For the watch, they said. But the watch was broken now, broken beyond repair, and everyone knew it, everyone except the men who had done the breaking. Sleep did not come that night. Harwin lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling, while the other builders tossed and turned in their own restless darkness. Outside, the wind continued its endless howl, but beneath the wind he could hear other sounds, boots on stone, distant voices, the creak of the gates, the sounds of Castle Black settling into a new and terrible order. No one spoke. The barracks were silent, except for breathing and the occasional cough. But Harwin could feel the fear in the room. It was thick as smoke, heavy as stone. Every man there knew that something had changed, that the world they had known yesterday was gone, and none of them knew what would replace it. When dawn finally came, it brought no relief. The light through the narrow windows was grey and weak. Harwin rose with the others and dressed in silence. They moved like ghosts, like men afraid to make noise, afraid to be noticed. The morning bell did not ring. That was the first sign that things were truly wrong. The bell always rang. Every morning for as long as Harwin had been at Castle Black. It called the men to their duties. It marked the beginning of the day. It was as reliable as the sunrise. But this morning, there was no bell, just silence. The builders gathered near the door, uncertain. Should they go to the common hall for breakfast? Should they report for their work assignments? Should they wait for orders that might never come? Kedge made the decision for them. "We eat," he said quietly. "Then we work. Same as always, until someone tells us different." It made sense. Work was normal. Work was safe. Work meant keeping their heads down. So they filed out of the barracks and crossed the yard toward the common hall. The yard was different in the daylight. Harwin could see it clearly now. See what he had only glimpsed in the darkness. There were guards posted everywhere. Rangers stood at the gates. More stood at the entrance to the Lord Commander's tower, at the armory, at the rookery. Men with hard faces and harder eyes. Men who watched everything and everyone. Thorn's men, all of them. And near the gate, watching the watchguards with cold calculation, were the wildlings. More of them than last night. They stood in groups of 10 or 20. Big men with axes and spears, women with bows, even some children, though they stayed behind the adults, all of them watching, waiting. The snow where Jon Snow had fallen had been covered with fresh powder during the night, but Harwin could still see the stain beneath, dark against white, a shadow that would not fade. He looked away and kept walking. The common hall was half empty when they arrived. The men who were there sat in clusters, speaking in low voices. The conversation stopped when the builders entered. Eyes tracked them as they moved to their usual table. Then the whispers resumed. Harwin collected his bowl of porridge and sat down. The food tasted like ash. He forced himself to eat anyway. He would need his strength. Whatever was coming, he would need his strength. Kedge sat beside him. "No officers," he muttered. "Not one." Harwin glanced around. Kedge was right. The high table was empty. Usually, at least one officer would be present at breakfast, ensuring order, settling disputes, making announcements. But today there was no one, just men eating in silence and fear. "They're deciding what to do," Harwin said quietly. "About what?" "About everything. About the wildlings, about the Lord Commander, about what to tell the realm. Is he dead then? Harwin did not answer. He did not know. No one knew. Or, if they did know, they were not saying. Jon Snow had vanished into his tower last night, and had not emerged. That was all anyone could say for certain. A man at the next table leaned toward them. Harwin recognized him. Donnell Hill, a steward who worked in the kitchens. His face was pinched with worry. "I heard them talking," Donnell whispered. "The officers. They were in the Lord Steward's chambers before dawn. I brought them wine and they didn't even notice me." "What did they say?" Kedge asked. Donnell glanced around nervously. Bowen Marsh was weeping. Actually weeping. Saying, "We had no choice over and over." And Thorne was telling him to be quiet, telling him it was done, and there was no going back now. Who else was there? Yarwick, Wick Whittlestick, some of the Rangers, maybe 10 men total, and they were arguing about what to do with the body. Harwin felt his stomach clench. The body? Donnell nodded. That's what they called him. Not the Lord Commander, not Jon Snow, just the body, like he was already gone. So Jon Snow was dead. The words were not spoken aloud, but they hung in the air between the 3 men. Dead. Murdered by his own brothers, stabbed in the yard like a common criminal. "What are they going to do?" Kedge asked. "Burn him," Donnell said. "That's what Thorne wants. Burn him quickly, before the wildlings can take the body, before anyone can ask too many questions." And the wildlings? That's what they're arguing about. Some want to send them back north. Others want to let them stay, but keep them outside the wall. And some... Donnell trailed off. Some what? Some want to kill them all while they still have the chance, before they rise up. The words settled over them like a weight. Harwin looked out the window toward the wildling camps. Thousands of them, men and women and children. They had come here seeking safety, seeking shelter. Jon Snow had promised them protection, and now Jon Snow was dead. "They can't kill them all," Kedge said. "There's too many, and they're armed." "I know," Donnell said, "but some of the brothers don't care. They think the wildlings will attack anyway. Think it's better to strike first." Harwin pushed his bowl away. He could not eat any more, could not sit here and listen to this. He stood. "Where are you going?" Kedge asked. "To work. I have shutters to finish." It was a lie. The shutters could wait. But Harwin needed to move, needed to think, needed to be somewhere other than this hall full of whispers and fear. He walked out into the cold. The yard was busier now. Men moved with purpose, carrying supplies, hauling water, sharpening weapons. The daily work of Castle Black continued, but it felt different, forced, like everyone was just going through the motions, pretending everything was normal while the world fell apart around them. Harwin started toward the workshop, then changed his mind. Instead, he walked along the base of the wall. He needed to see something, needed to understand what was happening beyond the small world of Castle Black. He climbed the stairs to the top of the wall. It was a long climb, 700 feet of ice and ancient magic. His legs burned by the time he reached the top. His breath came in clouds. But the view was worth it. From the top of the wall, he could see everything. To the south, the lands of the Gift stretched away toward the horizon, empty and white and endless. To the north, the haunted forest, dark and deep and full of secrets. And below him, spread out like a map, was Castle Black and the wildling camps. The camps were bigger than he had realized. They stretched for half a mile along the wall, tents and lean-tos and makeshift shelters, cook fires sending up thin trails of smoke, people moving between them like ants. So many people, more than lived in his entire village back home. And they were organizing. Harwin could see it from up here, see the patterns emerging. The warriors were gathering in the center of the camps. The women and children were being moved to the edges. Supplies were being collected. Weapons were being distributed. They knew something was coming. They were preparing for it. A voice spoke behind him. Quite a sight, isn't it? Harwin turned. An older ranger stood there. His name was Blackjack Bulwer. He'd been at the wall for 20 years. His face was weathered by wind and cold. His eyes were sad. "Yes, sir," Harwin said. "I'm no sir, just a ranger, same as I've always been." Blackjack moved to the edge and looked down at the camps. "I was here when Jon Snow brought them through. You should have seen it. Thousands of them, starving and terrified, women holding dead babies, old men who couldn't walk any more. And the Lord Commander stood right here and told them they were safe now, that the Watch would protect them." "He shouldn't have promised that," Harwin said quietly. Blackjack looked at him sharply. "Why not?" "Because he couldn't keep it. Because the Watch would never accept it. The Watch accepted it when Jon Snow was in command. It was his brothers who couldn't accept it. His brothers who put knives in him because they cared more about old hatreds than about surviving." Harwin said nothing. He did not know if Blackjack was right or wrong, didn't know if Jon Snow had been a hero or a fool. All he knew was that the man was dead, and Castle Black was balanced on a knife's edge. "What will you do?" Harwin asked. "When the fighting starts?" "If the fighting starts," Blackjack corrected. "And I don't know. I took vows. Same as you. Vows to defend the wall. Vows to obey my commanders. But which vows matter more when your commanders are murderers?" It was the question Harwin had been avoiding. The question every man at Castle Black had to be asking himself. The Night's Watch was built on vows, on obedience, on brotherhood. But what happened when brothers killed brothers? What happened when the chain of command was broken by blood? "I heard them say it," Blackjack continued. "For the Watch. Like that made it right. Like murdering their Lord Commander was somehow noble. And maybe they believed it. Maybe they really thought they were saving the Watch. Were they?" Blackjack laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Look down there, Builder. Look at those wildlings preparing for war. Look at the guards on our walls who trust no one. Look at this castle tearing itself apart. Does that look like saving the Watch to you?" Harwin looked. He saw the wildlings with their weapons, saw the rangers watching them, saw the fear and anger and suspicion that had replaced brotherhood, saw Castle Black becoming a prison instead of a fortress. "No," he said quietly, "it doesn't." "The thing about breaking something," Blackjack said, "is that you can't always put it back together. Not the way it was. Jon Snow tried to change the Watch, tried to make it into something new, something that could survive what's coming. And maybe he was wrong. Maybe the wildlings are still our enemies. Maybe the old ways are the only ways. But now we'll never know, because Thorne and the others didn't just kill Jon Snow. They killed the possibility. They killed the future. And all we have left is the past. And the past is dying, Builder, just like everything else." Blackjack turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed on the ice. Harwin watched him go, then looked back down at the camps. The wildlings were still organizing, still preparing. And he realized something. They were not preparing to attack. Not yet. They were preparing to defend, preparing for the watch to come for them, because they knew what happened next. They had seen it before, seen it their whole lives, the crows and the free folk, always enemies, always killing each other. Jon Snow had tried to change that, had tried to make peace, and his own men had killed him for it. Harwin descended the stairs slowly. His mind was churning. By the time he reached the bottom, he had made a decision. He needed to know the truth. Needed to know if Jon Snow was truly dead. Needed to see with his own eyes. He crossed the yard toward the Lord Commander's tower. The guards at the entrance watched him approach. One of them was Rast, the same man who had warned him away last night. "No entry," Rast said. "I need to speak with someone," Harwin said, "about the work orders, about what we're supposed to be doing." It was weak, transparent. But Rast seemed to consider it. Finally he nodded toward another man. "Wick is inside. You can ask him." Harwin entered the tower. It was dark inside, cold. He climbed the stairs to the second level where the stewards had their chambers. Wick Whittlestick stood in the corridor, speaking with another officer. He was a thin man with a nervous manner. When he saw Harwin, he frowned. "What do you want?" "Work orders, my lord, for the builders. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing today." "Same as always, repairs, maintenance, keep the castle standing." Wick waved a hand dismissively. "Now go." "Is the Lord Commander?" "There is no Lord Commander," Wick snapped. His voice was sharp, frightened. "Not anymore. Now leave before I have you thrown out." Harwin backed away, but as he turned, he saw something. A door slightly ajar. The door to the Lord Commander's chambers, and through the gap he saw a figure lying on a bed, covered with a blanket, surrounded by candles. The figure was not moving. Harwin hurried down the stairs. His heart was pounding. He had seen enough. Jon Snow was dead. There was no doubt now. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch had been murdered by his own men, and no one knew what came next. He emerged into the yard and nearly collided with a wildling. The man was huge, tall as a tree and broad as an ox. His beard was red and wild. His eyes were cold as the wall itself. "You," the wildling said. His voice was like gravel. "You're one of the crows." "I am," Harwin said. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Did you kill the Crow Lord, the one they called Snow?" "No, I'm just a builder. I had nothing to do with it." The wildling studied him, searching for lies. Finally, he nodded. "Thorne's men did it then, the ones who hated him." "Yes. And now they think they'll rule us? Think we'll bow to Crow commands?" Harwin said nothing. What could he say? The wildling leaned close. His breath smelled of meat and smoke. "Tell your new lords something, builder. Tell them we remember. Tell them the free folk don't forget. And tell them we're watching. Always watching." He walked away, leaving Harwin standing alone in the cold. The morning wore on. Harwin tried to work, tried to focus. But everywhere he went, he heard whispers, heard fragments of conversation that painted a picture of Castle Black tearing itself apart from the inside. Jon Snow was dead. Thorne was in command. The wildlings were preparing for war. Some brothers supported the murder. Others were horrified. And everyone was waiting for something to break, for the fragile peace to shatter, for the watch, they had said. But Harwin was beginning to understand the truth. They had not killed Jon Snow for the Watch. They had killed him for themselves, for their pride, for their fear, for their hatred of change, and now the Watch would pay the price. The wall still stood, 700 feet of ice, ancient and eternal and uncaring, but below it, in the shadow it cast, everything was falling apart, and no one knew how to stop it. The second day after the killing was worse than the first. Harwin woke to the sound of shouting, not close, but not far either, somewhere in the yard. Voices raised in anger. He sat up quickly. Around him, the other builders were stirring. Kedge was already at the window, peering out into the grey dawn. "What is it?" Harwin asked. "Fight," Kedge said. "Brothers and wildlings. Near the well." They dressed quickly and went outside. A crowd had gathered near the centre of the yard. Harwin pushed through to see what was happening. 2 men were on the ground, wrestling in the mud and snow. One wore the black of the Watch, the other wore furs. Blood streaked both their faces. Rangers pulled them apart. The brother was hauled to his feet, still shouting. "Thieving bastard! He took my knife! Saw him do it!" The wildling spat blood. "Your knife? It was lying in the dirt. Thought you crows didn't care about such things. Thought you were all brothers here." "We're not your brothers," the ranger snarled. "We'll never be your brothers." Sir Alistair. Thorn appeared. He walked through the crowd like a blade cut in cloth. Men stepped aside for him. His face was hard. His eyes were harder. He looked at the 2 fighters, then at the rangers holding them. "Take the brother to the cells," he said. "Cool him down. As for you—" He turned to the wildling. "Get back to your camp and tell your people to stay there. Next man who crosses into our yard without permission gets a rope around his neck." The wildling smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You want to hang me, Crow? Go ahead. But you'll be hanging 1,000 more before the day is done. We don't take orders from killers." Thorn's hand went to his sword. For a moment, Harwin thought he would draw it, thought the killing would start right here, right now. But Thorn mastered himself. His hand fell away. "Get him out of here," he said quietly, "before I change my mind." The wildling was led away. The crowd began to disperse, but the tension remained. It hung in the air like smoke. Harwin could feel it pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. Kedge appeared at his elbow. "This is how it starts," he whispered. "Small fights, small incidents. And then, one day someone goes too far and it all explodes. How long do we have? I don't know. Days, hours. Maybe we're already out of time." They walked back toward the workshop. Harwin tried to focus on work, tried to lose himself in the familiar rhythm of sawing and planing. But his mind would not be quiet. It kept circling back to the same questions. Who was in command now? What would they do about the wildlings? What would happen when word of Jon Snow's death reached the south? The answers came slowly, in pieces, throughout the day. First came the announcement. Sir Alistair gathered the watch in the yard after the midday meal. Harwin stood with the other builders near the back. The officers stood in a line behind Thorn. Bowen Marsh, Othel Yarwick, some of the senior rangers. Their faces were grim. "Brothers," Thorn began. His voice carried across the yard. "You all know what happened 2 nights ago. You know that Jon Snow is dead, killed by brothers who believed he had broken his vows, who believed he was leading the watch to ruin." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some men nodded. Others looked away. No one spoke. "I will not pretend this was an easy choice," Thorn continued. "Jon Snow was Lord Commander. He was elected by you, by us, but he forgot what the watch is for. He let our ancient enemies through the wall. He planned to march south and take part in the wars of the realm. He broke every vow he swore. More murmurs, louder now, some supportive, some angry. The men who killed him did what they believed was right. They acted for the watch, for the wall, for the defense of the realm. Whether you agree with them or not, it is done. Jon Snow is dead, and now we must decide what comes next. Thorne paused. He looked out over the assembled brothers. His eyes were cold. Until we can. Hold a proper choosing. Command falls to the senior officers. We will lead together. We will restore order. We will remember our purpose. And the wildlings, someone shouted from the crowd. Thorne's jaw tightened. The wildlings are a problem. Jon Snow made promises to them, promises we never agreed to, but we cannot simply drive them out. Not in winter, not with other threats beyond the wall. He did not say the word, did not speak of the others or the dead that walked, but everyone knew what he meant. Even the hardest men of the watch believed the stories now. Too many rangers had seen things. Too many brothers had not returned. For now, the wildlings stay, Thorne said, but they will remain in their camps. They will not enter Castle Black without permission. They will not take our food or our supplies. They are not our brothers. They are not our allies. They are here because we allow it. And if they forget that, we will remind them. It was a compromise, a careful balance. Keep the wildlings close enough to control, but far enough to avoid conflict. It would not last. Everyone knew it. But perhaps it would buy them time. The assembly ended. The brothers dispersed. Harwin heard fragments of conversation as he walked away. Some men were relieved, others were angry. The watch was split down the middle. Those who believed Jon Snow had betrayed them, and those who believed his killers were traitors. There would be no healing from this. Not for a long time. Harwin spent the afternoon working on the shutters. The wood was good northern pine, strong and straight. He shaped each board carefully, checked the joints, made sure everything fit together properly. The work calmed him, gave him something to focus on besides the chaos outside. But the chaos found him anyway. Wick Whittlestick appeared in the workshop doorway. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. "They're burning him," he said. "Tonight, at sunset. Thorne's orders." "Burning who?" Harwin asked, though he already knew. "Jon Snow. They're taking the body beyond the wall and burning it. Say it's safer that way. Say they can't risk him coming back." Coming back. The words sent a chill down Harwin's spine. He had heard the stories, the dead rising, the corpses that walked. Some said fire was the only way to make sure a man stayed dead. But burning Jon Snow felt wrong. The Lord Commander deserved better, deserved a funeral, deserved the respect of his brothers, not to be burned like refuse beyond the wall. "Who's going?" Harwin asked. "Just the officers, and a few rangers to stand guard. They don't want a crowd, don't want the wildlings to see." Wick's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're afraid, Harwin. Afraid of what the wildlings will do when they find out. The wildlings already know. Aye, but knowing and seeing are different things. Once he's burned, it's final. There's no bringing him back. And then—" Wick trailed off. "Then what? Then we find out if they're really going to accept this, or if they're going to come for us." Wick left. Harwin stood alone in the workshop. He looked at the shutters he had been making. They seemed pointless now. What good were shutters when the whole world was falling apart? He put away his tools and went outside. The yard was quiet, too quiet. Men moved through it like ghosts. No one spoke above a whisper. No one made eye contact. Everyone was waiting, watching, preparing for something they could not name. Harwin walked to the wall that overlooked the wildling camps. He had to see, had to know what they were doing. The camps were different now, more organized, more military. The warriors had formed into groups. Each group had a leader, a tall woman with a spear, a scarred man with an axe, a boy who could not have been more than 16, but who carried himself like a veteran. They were not preparing to flee, they were preparing to fight. And in the center of the largest camp, surrounded by a ring of warriors, was a giant, an actual giant. Harwin had heard they existed, had heard Jon Snow had brought one through the wall, but seeing it was different. The creature stood 12 feet tall. Its body was covered in fur and leather. Its face was almost human, but not quite. And its eyes, even from this distance, were intelligent, aware. The giant was watching Castle Black, watching and waiting. Harwin tore his gaze away. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists and tried to steady his breathing. This was madness. The Watch had perhaps 300 fighting men at Castle Black, maybe 400 if you counted every man who could hold a weapon. The wildlings had thousands, and a giant. If it came to war, the Watch would lose. It was that simple. But Thorn and the others did not seem to care. They believed in the wall, believed in discipline and tradition, and the superiority of trained soldiers over wildling rabble. They believed they could hold. Harwin was not so sure. The sun began to set. The sky turned red and gold. Harwin watched from the yard as a small group of men emerged from the Lord Commander's tower. They carried a body wrapped in black cloth. Jon Snow. They carried him through the gate and onto the wall. Harwin climbed the stairs. He stayed back, stayed out of sight. But he had to see this, had to witness it. The pyre had been built half a mile north of the wall. Just a pile of wood and kindling, nothing special, nothing worthy of a Lord Commander. Thorn and the officers stood around it. The body was placed on top. Someone said words. Harwin could not hear them, did not want to. Then Thorn took a torch and threw it onto the pyre. The flames caught quickly. They rose high and hot. Black smoke billowed into the sky. Harwin watched the fire consume the body, watched Jon Snow disappear into ash and memory. And he thought about what this meant. The Lord Commander was gone. The man who had tried to change the Watch, who had tried to make peace with the wildlings, who had tried to prepare them for the real enemy. All of that was gone now, burned away, reduced to nothing. And what was left? Alliser Thorne and his officers, men who believed in the old ways, who believed the wildlings were the enemy, who believed the Watch should hold the wall and nothing more, men who had committed murder and called it duty. The pyre burned for hours. Harwin watched until the flames died down, until there was nothing left but embers and ash. Then he descended the wall and went back to the barracks. The other builders were waiting. They looked at him with questions in their eyes. He shook his head. There was nothing to say. That night, the whispers grew louder. Men talked in the darkness, talked about what came next. Some said Thorn would restore order, would bring the Watch back to its true purpose. Others said the wildlings would attack, would take revenge for Jon Snow's death, would kill them all. And some said darker things, said that Jon Snow's murder was only the beginning, that the Watch was cursed now, that they had broken something fundamental, something that could never be repaired. Harwin believed them. He had seen the blood in the snow, had seen the body burned, had seen the wildlings preparing for war, had seen the fear in his brother's eyes. The Watch was broken. The wall still stood, but the Watch was broken, and no one knew how to fix it. In the morning, there would be new problems, new conflicts, new violence. The officers would try to maintain control. The wildlings would test the boundaries. The brothers would choose sides. And eventually, someone would push too far. Someone would cross the line. And then the killing would start in earnest. But for now, in the darkness, there was only waiting. Harwin closed his eyes. He thought about his village, about his mother and father, about the life he might have had if things had been different, if he had not stolen that bread, if he had not been caught, if. The world was built on ifs, and they were worth nothing. Outside the wind howled, the wall groaned and cracked, and somewhere in the wildling camps, warriors sharpened their weapons and prepared for the war they all knew was coming. The Night's Watch had stood for 8,000 years. It had survived the long night. It had survived rebellions and winters and the fall of kingdoms. But Harwin was beginning to think it would not survive this. The murder of Jon Snow had broken something, some vital piece that held everything together. And without it, the Watch was just men in black cloaks. Frightened men, angry men, men who had forgotten why they were here. The wall would stand. It always had. It always would. But the Watch, the Brotherhood, the vows, those were already dying, and no amount of fire could bring them back. The third morning brought snow. It fell thick and heavy from a grey sky. It covered the bloodstains in the yard. It covered the ash where Jon Snow had burned. It covered everything in white silence. But it could not cover the truth, could not hide what had been done. Harwin stood at the window of the workshop and watched the snow fall. Behind him, the other builders worked in silence. No one spoke any more, unless they had to. Words felt dangerous, like they might reveal too much, might force a man to choose a side. And choosing meant risk. 3 days since the killing. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of tension coiling tighter and tighter. Something had to break. Everyone knew it. The only question was, when? And what Harwin would do when it did. He had been thinking about that question constantly, lying awake at night, working through the options, trying to find a path that made sense. But every path led somewhere dark. Stay loyal to the Watch. That meant obeying Thorne and the other officers, the men who had murdered their Lord Commander, the men who called it duty and justice and pretended their hands were clean. Could Harwin follow orders from murderers? Could he stand beside them and call them brothers? The vows said yes. The vows said he had sworn to obey. That the Night's Watch was more important than any one man. That personal feelings did not matter. But the vows had been broken, not by Harwin, by the men who put knives in Jon Snow. They had broken the most sacred vow of all. Brothers do not kill brothers. That was the foundation of everything. Without it, what did the other vows mean? He could side with the wildlings. That was the second path. Jon Snow had brought them here, had promised them safety. They had more right to justice than anyone, more right to revenge. If fighting came, they would win. They had the numbers, the strength, the will. But they were wildlings, the ancient enemy. Everything Harwin had been taught said they were savages, raiders, thieves. Could he really stand with them against his sworn brothers? Could he raise a weapon against men he had lived beside for 3 years? The thought made him sick. But staying neutral made him sick too. Doing nothing while others decided the future. Hiding in the workshop while the world burned. Which brought him to the third path, desertion. The word felt heavy even in his thoughts. The Night's Watch did not forgive deserters. The penalty was death. Always death. No exceptions. No mercy. That was the price of breaking your vows. But men deserted anyway. Harwin knew of 3 who had tried in his time at Castle Black. 1 had been caught within a day, brought back and hanged. The 2nd had frozen to death a mile from the wall. They found his body in the spring. The 3rd had simply vanished. No one knew if he had made it south or died in the wilderness. 1 in 3 odds, maybe worse. And even if he made it, what then? He would be a deserter for the rest of his life. Hunted, marked, unable to return home, unable to live in any place where the Watch's writ held power. He would have to go far, the free cities maybe, or south to Dawn, somewhere the Night's Watch did not reach, a life in exile, forever looking over his shoulder, forever alone, but it would be a life, and he would be free. The thought terrified him, and tempted him in equal measure. A sound made him turn. Kedge stood in the doorway. His face was drawn. His eyes were red. He looked like he had not slept. "Harwin," he said quietly, "we need to talk, outside." They walked to the edge of the yard, away from listening ears. The snow was falling harder now. It muffled sound, made the world feel small and close. "I'm leaving," Kedge said without preamble. Harwin stared at him. "What?" "Tonight, after dark. I'm leaving. You'll die out there. You don't know the land, don't know how to survive in winter. I'll take my chances, better than staying here and waiting to be killed." Kedge glanced around, making sure no one was close. "I'm not the only one. There's 6 of us. Maybe 7, all builders or stewards, men who want no part of what's coming." 6 men? That's barely enough to keep watch. You'll freeze before you make it 10 miles. Then we freeze. At least we'll die free. Kedge grabbed Harwin's arm. "Come with us. You're young, you're strong, you're smart. You could make it." Harwin pulled his arm away. "Where would you even go?" "South, to Winterfell first, then further if we need to. The Boltons might kill us for deserting, or they might not care enough. Either way, it's better than here." "The Boltons? You trust the Boltons?" Kedge laughed. It was a bitter sound. "I don't trust anyone anymore, but I'd rather take my chances with them than stay here and watch brothers kill each other. Or watch the wildlings kill us all." Harwin said nothing. His mind was racing. Part of him wanted to say yes, wanted to pack his things and run, wanted to leave this cursed place behind and never look back. But another part held him back, the part that still believed in something, that still thought the vows meant something, that still hoped this could end without more blood. "Think about it," Kedge said. "We leave 2 hours after sunset. From the east gate, there's a loose board in the postern door. We can slip through without being seen. If you want to come, be there. If not—" He trailed off. "If not, I understand, and I won't tell anyone you knew." He walked away. Harwin watched him go. Then he turned and looked up at the wall. 700 feet of ice. Ancient, eternal, beautiful in its way. His prison. He went back to the workshop, tried to work, but his hands would not be still. His thoughts would not be quiet. The choice Kedge had offered him sat in his mind like a stone. Leave or stay, run or endure, break his vows or keep them. There was no good answer. Every path led to pain. Every choice had a cost. The day wore on. Harwin moved through it like a ghost. He ate without tasting, worked without thinking, spoke without meaning. His mind was elsewhere, turning over the options again and again. As evening approached, he made his way to the common hall. The evening meal was a quiet affair. Men ate quickly and left. No one wanted to linger. No one wanted to be around when the next crisis came. Harwin sat at his usual spot. He forced down the stew, forced down the bread. His stomach was in knots. He kept thinking about Kedge's offer. 2 hours after sunset, the east gate, a loose board in the postern door, freedom or death. He looked around the hall, saw the faces of his brothers, men he had lived beside for 3 years, men he had worked with, eaten with, endured the cold with. They were not friends. He had no friends at Castle Black, but they were familiar, known. Would he ever see them again if he left? Did it matter? A fight broke out near the kitchens, 2 stewards arguing over something small, a spilled cup, a misheard word. It did not matter. The anger was already there. The fight was just an excuse to let it out. Rangers pulled them apart. But the damage was done. The tension in the hall ratcheted up another notch. Men's hands went to their belts, to their knives. Eyes darted around, looking for threats, looking for enemies. This was what Castle Black had become, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Harwin stood and left. He could not breathe in there, could not think. He went outside into the snow. It was still falling. The yard was empty, except for the guards. Everyone else had retreated indoors, seeking warmth, seeking safety. He walked to the base of the wall, put his hand against the ice. It was cold, so cold it burned. He pulled his hand away and looked up. The top of the wall was lost in the snow and clouds. It looked like it went on forever, like it touched the sky itself. Men had built this 8,000 years ago. Men with tools and will and desperation. They had built a wall to keep out the darkness, to protect the realms of men, and now men were destroying it from within, not the wall itself. That would stand until the world ended. But the watch, the brotherhood, the idea that men could stand together against the night, that was dying, bleeding out in the snow. Jon Snow had tried to save it, tried to change it, tried to make it strong enough to face what was coming, and his brothers had killed him for it. Harwin thought about his vows, thought about the words he had spoken before the heart tree. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men. Beautiful words, noble words. But what did they mean when the watch itself was broken, when brothers murdered brothers, when the shield had turned inward and was destroying itself? A voice spoke behind him. You're thinking about leaving. Harwin spun. A wildling woman stood there. She was young, maybe 20. She wore furs and leather. A bow hung across her back. Her eyes were grey and sharp. I don't know what you mean, Harwin said. Yes, you do. I can see it on your face. You're thinking about running, about deserting. Who are you? My name is Dalla. I came through the wall with Mance's people. I'm a scout. Was a scout. Before Jon Snow brought us here. She moved closer. I've been watching you. Watching a lot of the crows, trying to figure out who's dangerous and who's just scared. And what am I? Scared, but not dangerous. Not yet. She studied him. You didn't kill Jon Snow. You're too young, too low. You're just a builder trying to survive. That's all any of us are trying to do. No, some of you are trying to kill us. Some are planning it, waiting for the right moment, and some of you are trying to decide which side you're on. Harwin said nothing. She was right. Too right. If you run, Dalla said, you'll probably die. Winter's here. The land is frozen. There's no food, no shelter. And if you head south, you'll run into Bolton men or Karstark men or worse. They'll hang you for deserting. I know. But if you stay, you might die too. When the fighting starts, because it will start. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but it's coming. I know that too. Dalla smiled. It was a sad smile. You're trapped, Crow, just like all of us. Jon Snow was the only one who understood, the only one who saw that we're all on the same side against what's really coming. And now he's dead. What do you want from me? Nothing. Just wanted you to know that if you do run, I won't stop you, won't tell anyone. Every man has the right to save himself. She turned to leave, then paused. But if you stay, remember this. The free folk aren't your enemy. We never were. The real enemy is coming from the north, from the cold. And when it gets here, none of this will matter. Not who killed who, not who broke what vows, none of it. She walked away, disappeared into the snow like a ghost. Harwin stood alone. The cold was seeping into his bones. He needed to go inside, needed to get warm, but he could not move. Could not stop thinking about what she had said. The real enemy is coming from the north. He had heard the stories, the others, the White Walkers, the dead that walked. Part of him still did not believe it, still thought it was just old stories meant to scare children. But Jon Snow had believed it, had seen something beyond the wall that had changed him, had made him desperate enough to bring the wildlings through, desperate enough to break every tradition, every rule. And it had gotten him killed. The sun was setting, the snow was getting worse. Harwin finally forced himself to move. He went to the barracks. The other builders were there. Some were sleeping. Some were sitting on their bunks, staring at nothing. Kedge was not there. Neither were three other men Harwin knew by sight. The deserters were already preparing, getting ready to run. 2 hours after sunset. The east gate. Harwin lay down on his bunk. He did not sleep, just stared at the ceiling and thought about his choices, thought about his life, thought about what he owed and what he wanted and what he feared. The vows said he should stay, should serve, should obey. But the vows had been broken, not by him. Common sense said he should run, should save himself, should get as far from Castle Black as possible before the killing started. But running meant death. Probably, almost certainly, which left him where he started, trapped, with no good choices, no safe path. The bells rang for the changing of the watch. First bell, second bell, third bell. Harwin counted them, counted the minutes slipping away, counted the time until he had to decide. Stay or go, live or die, keep faith or break free. He thought about his father, about the lessons he had learned. Keep your head down, do your work, stay out of trouble. Good advice for surviving, bad advice for living. He thought about Jon Snow, a man who had tried to do the right thing, who had put duty above comfort, who had made hard choices and paid for them with his life. Was that noble or just stupid? Harwin did not know anything any more. The darkness deepened, the barracks grew quiet. Men snored, men shifted in their sleep, and Harwin lay awake and waited for the moment when he would have to choose. 2 hours after sunset, the east gate, a loose board in the postern door, and on the other side, the wild, the cold, the unknown, freedom or death. He closed his eyes and tried to decide which one he wanted more. Harwin rose in the darkness. He had not slept, had not even tried. He had lain on his bunk for hours, listening to the sounds of the barracks, the breathing of sleeping men, the creak of old wood, the howl of wind through cracks in the stone, and beneath it all, the silence. The terrible waiting silence that had settled over Castle Black like a shroud. 2 hours after sunset had come and gone. He had not moved, had not gone to the east gate, had not joined Kedge and the others in their desperate flight. He had stayed in his bunk, stayed in the barracks, stayed at Castle Black. He did not know if it was courage or cowardice, did not know if he had made the right choice or thrown away his only chance at life. All he knew was that when the moment came, when he had to stand and walk to that gate, his legs would not move. The vows held him, or fear held him, or something else he could not name. So he stayed. And now, in the deep hours before dawn, he rose. His body ached. His mind was numb. He dressed quietly and slipped out of the barracks. The yard was dark, except for torches burning at the gates and on the walls. Guards stood at their posts. Their breath made clouds in the freezing air. Harwin walked without purpose. Just walked. He needed to move. Needed to do something other than lie still and think. He found himself near the stables. The smell of horses and hay was familiar, comforting in its way. He stood in the doorway and looked inside. The horses shifted in their stalls. One whinnied softly. Animals sensed things, sensed danger, sensed change. They knew something was wrong. A sound made him turn. Footsteps in the snow, heavy ones. Harwin pressed himself against the stable wall and watched. 3 men crossed the yard. They wore black, but their movements were furtive, secretive. They were carrying something. Bundles wrapped in cloth. Supplies. Harwin's heart sank. More deserters. Men gathering what they needed before they ran. How many had already left? How many more would go before the sun rose? The watch was bleeding. Losing men, losing strength. And Thorn and the other officers either did not know or did not care. The 3 men disappeared into the shadows. Harwin waited until they were gone, then continued walking. He had no destination, just needed to keep moving, keep his blood flowing, keep from thinking too much about the choice he had made, or failed to make. He was near the Lord Commander's tower when he heard voices. Low, urgent. He stopped, pressed himself against the wall, listened. Cannot wait any longer. That was Bowen Marsh, the Lord Steward. His voice was tight with stress. The men are deserting. 3 more tonight. Maybe more we have not counted. Let them go. Alistair Thorne, cold, dismissive. We are better off without cowards. We need every man we have. The wildlings outnumber us 5 to 1, maybe more. If they attack, they will not attack. They are frightened, leaderless. Jon Snow was the only thing holding them together. You did not see them today. A third voice, Othel Yarwick, the first builder. I walked near their camps. They are not frightened, Alistair. They are angry, and they are organized. They have warriors, leaders, that giant. A giant is just a big man, Thorne said. It will die like any other. You are underestimating them, and you are letting fear cloud your judgment. We hold the wall. We hold Castle Black. We have discipline, training. We are brothers of the Night's Watch. They are wildlings. They are thousands of wildlings, Marsh said. His voice was rising. And we murdered their only ally, the only crow they trusted. Do you really think they will just accept that? Do you think they will stay in their camps and follow our orders? They will if they want to live through the winter. No, Yarwick's voice was firm. They will not. I know these people, Alyssa. I have fought them, traded with them. They do not forgive, they do not forget, and they do not bow. Silence. Harwin held his breath. He should leave, should not be listening to this. But he could not move, could not look away. Then what do you suggest? Thorn asked. His voice was dangerous now, quiet. Should we open the gates and let them slaughter us? Should we kneel and beg forgiveness for doing what needed to be done? I suggest we talk to them, Marsh said. Find their leaders. Explain that Jon Snow broke his vows, that we acted to preserve the Watch, that we do not want war. You want to negotiate with wildlings. I want to survive. We will survive, Thorn said. We will survive because we are strong, because we hold the wall, because we remember what we are. What we are is 300 men surrounded by thousands of enemies, Yarwick said. What we are is trapped in our own castle. What we are is dying, Alyssa, slowly but surely. Men are deserting. Supplies are running low. Morale is gone. And winter has just begun. Then we will endure, as the Watch has always endured. The Watch endured because it had purpose, Marsh said quietly. Because men believed in something. What do they believe in now? Murder? Betrayal? They believe in duty. Some do. Others believe we are traitors. That we killed the Lord Commander for no reason except that we hated him. That we doomed the Watch to satisfy our own pride. Is that what you believe, Bowen? A pause, long and heavy. I believe we did what we thought was right. But I also believe we may have made a terrible mistake. Another silence. This one felt different, final, like something had broken between them, some last thread of unity. Get out, Thorn said. Both of you. If you do not have the stomach for what comes next, get out. Footsteps. The door to the tower opened. Marsh and Yarwick emerged. They did not speak, did not look at each other, just walked away in opposite directions. Their faces were pale in the torchlight. Their eyes were hollow. Harwin waited until they were gone, then slipped away. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. He had heard too much, knew too much. The officers were fracturing, turning on each other. The unity they showed the men was a lie. Beneath it, they were just as lost as everyone else. He made his way back toward the barracks. The sky was growing lighter. Dawn was coming. Another day. Another 24 hours of waiting and wondering and fearing. He was halfway across the yard when the screaming started. It came from the south, from the direction of the wildling camps, high and sharp and full of terror. A woman's voice, then another, then men shouting, then the sound of steel on steel. Harwin ran, did not think, just ran towards the sound. Others were running too. Rangers, stewards, men pouring out of the barracks, all of them moving toward the gate. He reached the wall and looked over. His blood went cold. The wildling camps were in chaos. Men were fighting, not wildlings against crows, wildlings against wildlings. 2 groups, maybe 3. It was hard to tell in the dim light, but there was blood, there were bodies, and there was fire. Someone had set one of the tents ablaze. The flames rose high. Black smoke poured into the sky. People were screaming, running, trying to escape the fire and the fighting. "What is happening?" someone shouted. "I don't know." Should we help them? Help which ones? No one knew. No one understood. The wildlings were tearing themselves apart, and no one knew why. Thorn appeared on the wall. He looked down at the carnage. His face was stone. "Close the gates," he said. "No one in or out." "But sir, they are killing each other." "I said close the gates. Let them sort it out themselves. This is not our concern." The gates swung shut. The bar dropped into place. And the watch stood on the walls and watched the wildlings fight and die below. Harwin could not look away. He saw a man with an axe cut down a woman, saw a boy no older than 10 run screaming from a burning tent, saw the giant wade into the fighting, swinging its massive arms, crushing men like insects. This was madness. This was the end of everything. The fighting went on for an hour, maybe longer. It was hard to measure time, hard to think. Harwin just stood and watched and felt something inside him break. These were the people Jon Snow had saved, the people he had died for, and now they were killing each other, destroying themselves, making his sacrifice meaningless. Finally, the fighting stopped. Not because anyone had won, but because everyone was exhausted. The survivors pulled back, separated into groups. The fires were put out. The bodies were left where they fell. Silence descended, broken only by moaning, by weeping, by the wind. Thorn ordered the gates opened. Rangers went out. They moved carefully, weapons drawn. They walked among the wildling camps, counting the dead, assessing the damage. Harwin descended from the wall. He felt sick, hollow. He went to the workshop, sat down on a bench, put his head in his hands. Kedge appeared in the doorway. Harwin looked up. The older man was pale, trembling. "You did not leave," Harwin said. "No. I got to the gate, got the board loose, was halfway through." Kedge sat down heavily. "Then I stopped. Thought about my sister, about my niece. Thought about what would happen to them if I died out there, if I never came home. So you stayed." "So I stayed." Kedge laughed. It was a broken sound. "And for what? To watch this? To watch everything fall apart. What happened out there? With the wildlings?" "I heard some of the rangers talking. 2 of the wildling leaders got into a fight. Over food, over who was in charge, over Jon Snow's death. I don't know. Does it matter? They started killing each other. And now there are 50 more dead. Maybe 100. Harwin closed his eyes. "How much more can this place take?" "Not much. We are at the breaking point, Harwin. All of us. One more incident, one more death, one more wrong word, and it all goes up in flames." As if to prove his point, shouts erupted from the yard. Harwin and Kedge rushed outside. A crowd had gathered near the well. In the centre, 2 men faced each other. One was a ranger. The other was a wildling. They had weapons drawn. "You stole from my tent," the wildling was shouting. "I saw you." "I didn't steal anything," the ranger shot back. "You're a liar." "I saw you." More men were gathering, more wildlings, more brothers. The 2 groups were separating, forming lines, hands going to weapons. This was it. This was the moment everything broke. Harwin looked around for an officer, for someone to stop this. But there was no one. Thorn was in the tower. Marsh was hiding. Yarwick was gone. The watch had no leadership, no control. The wildling lunged. The ranger parried. Steel rang on steel. The crowd roared, and then everyone was moving. Wildlings charging forward, brothers raising weapons, the yard exploding into violence. Harwin was shoved aside. He hit the ground hard, rolled, came up on his hands and knees. Around him, men were fighting, killing, dying. The careful balance that had held for 3 days was gone, shattered. He saw a wildling woman put an arrow through a steward's throat, saw a ranger cut down a wildling boy, saw the giant roaring and swinging, crushing men with every blow. This was the end of the Night's Watch, the end of everything. Harwin scrambled to his feet. He had no weapon, no armor. He was just a builder. He needed to hide, needed to survive. He ran for the armory, thought he could barricade himself inside, wait for this to end. He was 10 feet from the door when someone grabbed him, spun him around. It was Dalla, the wildling woman. Her face was streaked with blood. Her eyes were wild. "You need to run," she said. "Now, while you can." "Run where?" "Anywhere. South, north. I don't care. But if you stay here, you die. We are taking Castle Black, taking the wall, and we are not leaving anyone alive who stands against us." "I am not standing against you. I am just a builder. You wear the black. That is enough." She pushed him toward the gate. "Go. Run. I am giving you this one chance because you're not like the others, because I think you are a good man. But this is the only chance you get." She ran back into the fighting, disappeared into the chaos. Harwin stood, frozen. His mind was blank. His body would not move. Then something inside him snapped. Some final barrier broke, and he ran. He ran for the gate, pushed through the fighting, dodged a swinging axe, jumped over a body, kept running. The gate was open, wildlings were pouring through, but he ran against the tide, ran south, ran away from Castle Black, ran away from the Watch, from his vows, from everything he had been. He hit the snow beyond the gate and kept running. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he did not stop, could not stop. Behind him, the sounds of battle raged, men screaming, metal clashing, the roar of the giant. The Night's Watch was dying, Castle Black was falling, and Harwin was running into the wild, into the cold, into the unknown. He did not know if he would survive, did not know where he was going, did not know anything except that he had to keep moving, had to get away, had to live. The snow fell harder, the world turned white, and Harwin ran until Castle Black was lost behind him, until the sounds of battle faded, until there was nothing but silence and snow and the endless winter stretching before him. He had made his choice. Finally, at the very last moment, he had chosen to live, and the Watch could burn. The cold was absolute. Harwin stumbled through the snow, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His legs felt like lead. His face was numb. His fingers were beyond pain. He had been running for hours, or minutes. Time had lost all meaning in the white blur of the storm. Behind him, Castle Black was gone, swallowed by snow and distance. He could no longer hear the fighting, could no longer hear anything except the wind and his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He fell. His knees hit the frozen ground. He tried to stand, but his legs would not obey. He knelt in the snow, gasping, trying to think through the fog in his mind. He was going to die out here. The thought came clear and cold as the air around him. He had no supplies, no food, no water, no shelter, just the clothes on his back and the terror that had driven him from Castle Black. He would freeze before nightfall, would become another corpse in the snow. Another man who ran from the wall and found nothing but death. But even knowing this, he couldn't make himself go back, could not face what he had left behind, the fighting, the blood, the collapse of everything he had believed in. The watch was broken, Castle Black was lost, and Harwin was alone. He forced himself to his feet, forced his legs to move, one step, another. He did not know where he was going. South, just south, away from the wall, away from the wildlings and the chaos and the murder. South to what? To whom? He had no answer, did not let himself think about it. Just walked, kept walking, because stopping meant dying. And some animal part of him still wanted to live. The storm began to ease. The snow thinned. Harwin could see further now, see the landscape stretching before him, white and empty and merciless. No trees, no shelter, nothing but snow and ice and the low grey sky. He was in the Gift, the lands south of the wall that belonged to the Night's Watch. Abandoned villages and empty fields. Once, these lands had been settled. Farmers had lived here, worked the soil, raised families. But the cold had driven them away, winter after winter, until no one remained, just ghosts and memories, and men like Harwin, fleeing south with nowhere to go. He walked until his legs gave out again. This time he could not get up. He lay in the snow and stared at the sky. The grey was deepening, evening was coming, and with it the true cold, the killing cold. He closed his eyes. Maybe it was better this way. Better to die out here than to die in the fighting. Better to freeze than to burn. Better to be alone than to watch brothers kill brothers. At least he would die free. A sound cut through his thoughts. Hoofbeats. Distant, but growing closer. Harwin's eyes snapped open. He tried to move, tried to hide, but his body would not respond. The horse appeared through the snow. A shaggy, northern beast with a rider wrapped in furs. The rider pulled up short when he saw Harwin, stared down at him. The man's face was hidden by a scarf and hood. "You're far from the wall, Crow," the rider said. His voice was rough, suspicious. Harwin tried to speak. His lips were frozen. His tongue felt thick. He managed a single word. "Please." The rider studied him for a long moment. Then he dismounted, walked over, looked down at Harwin with dark eyes. "Deserter?" Harwin wanted to deny it, wanted to explain. But what was the point? He nodded. "They'll kill you for that. If they catch you." "I know." The rider crouched down, pulled off his scarf. He was an old man, 60, maybe older. His face was weathered and scarred, but his eyes were not unkind. "What happened at Castle Black?" "Fighting. The wildlings. The Lord Commander is dead. Everything is falling apart." The old man grunted. "Heard rumours. Didn't believe them. Jon Snow dead, eh?" "The bastard of Winterfell. Shame. He was a good lad. Met him once, years back. Had more honour than sense, but that's the Stark way. Are you going to turn me in?" "To who?" "The Watch." The old man laughed. It was a harsh sound. "The Watch is finished, boy. Has been for years. They just didn't know it yet. I'm not turning you into a corpse." "Then what?" "I'm deciding if you're worth saving, or if I should leave you here to freeze." Harwin said nothing, had nothing to say. His fate was in this stranger's hands now. He was too weak to fight, too tired to run, too cold to care. The old man sighed. "Get up. I can't carry you. If you want to live, you'll have to walk." He extended a hand. Harwin stared at it. Then, with the last of his strength, he reached up and took it. The old man hauled him to his feet. Harwin swayed, nearly fell, but he stayed upright. There's a shelter, 1/2 mile south. Old village, most of it's ruins, but there's a barn that still has a roof. We'll stop there. Get you warm. Then you can decide what to do. Next. Harwin nodded. Could not speak. Could barely think. But he could walk, 1 foot in front of the other, following the old man through the snow. The barn was exactly as described, half collapsed, but one corner still stood, still kept out the wind. The old man led the horse inside and started a fire in a ring of stones. Harwin huddled near it, felt warmth seeping back into his body, felt pain as his fingers and toes began to thaw. The old man pulled out food, dried meat, hard bread, a skin of something that smelled like ale. He handed them to Harwin. Eat, slowly. You'll make yourself sick otherwise. Harwin ate. The food tasted like ash, but he forced it down. His stomach cramped, but he kept eating. He needed the strength, needed to survive the night. What's your name, boy? Harwin. I'm Benfred. Used to have a farm near here. Before the cold took it. Before everything died. The old man poked at the fire. Now I'm just a drifter, trading, hunting, surviving, same as everyone else in these cursed lands. Why did you help me? Because I'm old and foolish, because I remember what it's like to have nowhere to go, because... He trailed off, stared into the flames, because the world is cold enough without making it colder. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, for the first time in days, Harwin felt something like safety. What will you do? Benfred asked. Can't go back to the wall. Can't stay here. Winter's settling in. You'll die if you stay in the gift. I don't know. South is your only option. Winterfell. Or beyond. The free cities, if you can make it that far. The Boltons hold Winterfell now. They'll kill deserters. Maybe. Or maybe they have bigger problems. War is coming. Everyone can feel it. The Boltons, the Starks, the whole North is ready to tear itself apart. One more deserter might not matter. Harwin looked up. The Starks, but they are dead, killed at the Red Wedding. Benfred smiled. It was a cold smile. The sons, aye, Robb and Bran and Rickon. But there are other Starks. Sansa is with the Boltons, they say, married to Ramsay, and there are whispers of others. Jon Snow was a Stark, bastard or not, and there are always whispers in the north, whispers of wolves still running, of vengeance coming. Jon Snow is dead. Aye, you said. But dead men have a way of mattering in the north. The Starks are not like southern lords. They remember, the north remembers, and debts get paid, even if it takes generations. Harwin did not know what to make of this, did not know if Benfred was speaking truth or just telling stories to pass the time. But it did not matter. Jon Snow was dead. The Starks were scattered. The north was broken, and Harwin was just a deserter trying to survive. Sleep, Benfred said. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow, if we're still alive. Harwin lay down near the fire. He did not think he could sleep, did not think he deserved to sleep. But exhaustion took him, pulled him down into darkness. And for a few hours he did not dream, did not think, did not remember. He woke to pale light filtering through the gaps in the barn walls. Dawn. He had survived the night. Benfred was already awake, already moving, packing his things, preparing the horse. Time to move, the old man said. Can't stay in one place too long, not in winter, not in the gift. Where are you going? South, to a village called Molestown, or what's left of it. There's an inn there, or there was. People gather there sometimes. Traders, travelers, deserters. He looked at Harwin. You can come with me if you want, or you can go your own way. Your choice. Harwin stood. His body ached. His muscles were stiff from the cold and the running and the fear. But he was alive. That had to count for something. I'll come with you, he said, if you'll have me. Benfred nodded. Fair enough. But we need to be clear on something. I'm not your friend. I'm not your father. I'm just an old man heading south, and you're someone walking the same direction. If we get into trouble, you're on your own. Understood? Understood. They set out. The horse carried Benfred. Harwin walked. The pace was slow, but steady. The land was flat and white and endless. They passed abandoned farmsteads, empty villages, signs of life that had once been. As they walked, Harwin's mind began to work again, began to process what had happened. He had deserted, had broken his vows, had run from the watch in its darkest hour. There was no going back from that, no redemption, no forgiveness. He was a deserter, a coward, an oath-breaker. The words should have hurt, should have filled him with shame. But they did not. All he felt was emptiness, a hollow place where his identity had been. He was not a builder anymore, not a brother of the Night's Watch, not anything. Just a man walking south through the snow. They reached Molestown 3 days later. It was smaller than Harwin remembered, poorer, more desperate. The inn was still standing. Smoke rose from its chimney. People moved through the streets. Not many, but enough to show life still clung here. Benfred led them to the inn. They entered. The warmth hit Harwin like a wall, the smell of food and ale and unwashed bodies. Tables were scattered through the common room. A few people sat at them. They looked up when Harwin and Benfred entered. Eyes assessed them, measured them, looked for threats. Benfred approached the innkeeper, a woman, large and hard-faced. 2 bowls of whatever you're serving, and ale. Good ale, not the piss you serve the others. The woman smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You have coin, Benfred? I have coin. Then you'll get your bowls, and the good ale. Her eyes shifted to Harwin. Who's this? No one, just a traveller. Dressed like a crow. Used to be a crow, not any more. The woman studied Harwin for a long moment. Then she shrugged. Not my business, long as he pays and doesn't cause trouble. They sat at a corner table, away from the others. The food came, stew, thick and greasy but hot. Harwin ate slowly, let the warmth spread through him, let himself believe for just a moment that he might actually survive this. What now? He asked Benfred. That's up to you. You can stay here, try to find work, try to blend in, or you can keep moving, head further south, away from the wall, away from the watch. Where would I go? Anywhere, everywhere. The world is bigger than the North, boy. There are cities in the south. Old Town, King's Landing, the free cities across the narrow sea, places where no one cares about the Night's Watch, where a deserter is just another man trying to live. Harwin considered this. The idea of leaving the north, of going somewhere warm, somewhere far from snow and ice and the wall. It should have been appealing, should have filled him with hope. But all he felt was loss. I don't know who I am anymore, he said quietly. I was a builder, a brother. I had a purpose. Now I have nothing. You have your life, Benfred said. That's more than most men get. More than the brothers you left at Castle Black. They're probably dead now, killed by wildlings or each other or the cold. But you're alive. That has to mean something. Does it? That's for you to decide. They finished their meal in silence. Around them, the inn slowly filled. More travellers, more desperate people fleeing something, fleeing the cold, fleeing the war, fleeing their pasts. Harwin realized something. He was not alone. Not really. The world was full of people like him. People who had lost everything. People who were just trying to survive. People who had made hard choices and paid hard prices. Maybe that was enough. Maybe survival was enough. A commotion at the door drew his attention. 3 men entered. They wore mail under their cloaks. They carried swords, and they had the look of soldiers, professionals, dangerous, Bolton men. Harwin's blood went cold. He ducked his head, tried to make himself small, tried to disappear. The soldiers scanned the room. Their eyes passed over Harwin, moved on. They approached the innkeeper, spoke in low voices. She shook her head, pointed toward the door. They left. Harwin let out a breath he had not known he was holding. "You know what they're looking for?" Benford asked quietly. "Deserters, traitors, anyone who might be a threat. You should leave, tonight, before they come back." "Where? Does it matter? Just away from here, away from the north if you can manage it." Harwin nodded. Benford was right. He couldn't stay here, could not stay anywhere near the wall, near the north, near his old life. He had to go, had to keep running, had to find somewhere he could become someone new. They left the inn after dark. Benford gave Harwin supplies, food, a cloak, a knife. "It's not much," the old man said, "but it's what I can spare. Why are you helping me? I told you, I'm old and foolish, and maybe I see something of myself in you. A man who made a choice he'll regret for the rest of his life. A man who has to live with it anyway. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive. That's all any of us can do." They parted ways. Benford headed west. Harwin headed south. Into the darkness. Into the unknown. He walked through the night, put as much distance between himself and Molestown as he could. As the sky began to lighten, he looked back, looked north, toward the wall. He could not see it from here, but he knew it was there, 700 feet of ice, ancient, eternal, standing watch over the realms of men, except there was no one watching anymore. The night's watch was broken. Castle Black was fallen. The wall stood alone. And Harwin wondered for the first time what that meant. What happened when the wall stood, but the watch did not? What happened when the shields were gone, and only the barrier remained? He thought about what Dalla had said. The real enemy is coming from the north, the others, the white shadows, the dead that walked. Were they real? Was that what Jon Snow had seen? Was that why he had been so desperate? Why he had brought the wildlings through? Why he had broken every tradition and every rule? Harwin did not know, would never know. He was not part of that world anymore, was not part of the Watch, was not part of anything. He was just a man walking south, a deserter, an oathbreaker, a survivor. The sun rose, pale and cold and distant. Harwin walked toward it, walked away from the wall, away from his past, away from everything he had been. He did not know where he was going, did not know if he would survive, did not know if anything he had done mattered. But he walked anyway, one foot in front of the other, because that was all he could do, all anyone could do. Keep walking, keep living, keep hoping that somewhere, somehow, there was still a future, even if he could not see it yet. Years later, if someone asked Harwin about the night's watch, about Castle Black, about the night the wall went silent, he would struggle to answer. The memories would be there, sharp and painful as ever. But the words would fail him. How could he explain what it felt like to watch everything you believed in collapse? How could he explain the choice between vows and survival? How could he explain the guilt that never quite went away? He could not. So he wouldn't try. He would just say that he had been there, had seen it, had survived it, and that the wall still stood, would always stand. But the watch, the brotherhood, the vows, those had died that night, died when Jon Snow fell, died when brothers turned on brothers, died when the shield cracked and could not be repaired. The wall stood, ancient and eternal and uncaring. But the men who guarded it, they were just men, fallible and frightened and human, and in the end, that was what killed them. Not the wildlings, not the cold, not even the others, if they were real. Just themselves. Just their own fear and pride and hatred. The Night's Watch had stood for 8,000 years. It had survived the long night. It had survived rebellions and winters and the fall of kingdoms. But it could not survive betrayal from within. And that, Harwin knew, was the real tragedy. Not that Jon Snow died, not that Castle Black fell, not that the watch was broken, but that it broke itself, that the brothers killed the brotherhood, that the shield destroyed itself. For the watch, they had said. But they had saved nothing, protected nothing, preserved nothing. They had just killed and died, and made everything they feared come true. The wall still stood, but it stood alone. And Harwin walked south, carrying the weight of that knowledge, carrying the memory of the night. Everything fell apart, carrying the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Could it have been different? Could they have found another way? He would never know. All he knew was that he had survived, had lived when others died, had chosen life over vows. And whether that made him a coward or a survivor, whether it made him wise or weak, whether it mattered at all in the grand scheme of things, he could not say. He just knew he was alive. And the wall, indifferent and eternal, stood behind him. A monument to what had been, a reminder of what was lost, and a warning of what might still come. If anyone was left to heed it,